In the year 480 BCE, as the massive Persian army of Xerxes swept across the Greek world like a tide of bronze and steel, one man stood at the narrow pass of Thermopylae with unshakable resolve. King Leonidas of Sparta embodied the Stoic virtues that would later be codified by philosophers, demonstrating through action what it meant to live according to nature, duty, and honor. The Persian messenger arrived in Sparta with Xerxes' demand for earth and water, the traditional symbols of submission. Lesser kings might have calculated odds, weighed political consequences, or sought compromise. Leonidas responded with characteristic Spartan brevity, kicking the messenger into a well. This was not mere bravado, but the expression of a fundamental Stoic principle. Some things are worth more than life itself, and virtue cannot be negotiated away. When the oracle at Delphi prophesied that either Sparta would fall or a Spartan king must die, Leonidas accepted this fate without hesitation. The Stoic accepts what cannot be changed while focusing entirely on what lies within their control. Leonidas could not control the Persian invasion or the oracle's prophecy, but he could control his response, his courage, and his commitment to duty. The decision to march north with only 300 Spartans was not tactical suicide, but strategic wisdom. Leonidas understood that the real battle was not just military, but moral. Greece needed inspiration more than soldiers. By choosing his elite guard, men with living sons to carry on their names, he ensured that their sacrifice would echo through generations. Each warrior had already proven his virtue and would face death with the same discipline they had shown in life. At Thermopylae, as the Persian host assembled like storm clouds on the horizon, Leonidas demonstrated the Stoic principle of preferred indifference. Life, death, comfort, and suffering were all equally acceptable if faced with virtue. When Xerxes sent another messenger demanding surrender, promising riches and power in exchange for submission, Leonidas replied with words that captured the essence of Stoic philosophy. His duty was not to live comfortably, but to live virtuously. The battle itself became a masterclass in Stoic endurance. For 2 days, the 300 held the pass against impossible odds. They fought not with desperate fury, but with calm precision, each man performing his role with the mechanical perfection that came from a lifetime of discipline. When their spears broke, they drew swords. When their swords shattered, they fought with their hands. This was not rage, but reasoned action in service of the highest good. Leonidas faced each moment of the battle with present moment awareness, another key Stoic principle. He did not waste mental energy lamenting the size of the Persian army or fantasizing about victory. Instead, he focused entirely on the immediate task, holding the pass, inspiring his men, and demonstrating that some values transcend death itself. When Ephialtes revealed the mountain path that would allow the Persians to surround them, Leonidas again displayed Stoic acceptance. The situation had changed, but his response remained consistent with his principles. Rather than flee or despair, he dismissed the allied forces to save their lives while keeping his 300 to fulfill their destiny. This decision reflected the Stoic understanding that we cannot control external events, only our response to them. The final stand on the third day exemplified the Stoic concept of the good death. As arrows darkened the sky like a solar eclipse, one Spartan warrior remarked that they would fight in the shade. This moment of humor in the face of annihilation demonstrated the Stoic ability to maintain perspective even in extremity. Fear, anger, and despair were emotions to be acknowledged but not obeyed. As Leonidas fell, pierced by dozens of arrows and spears, his last thoughts were not of regret or bitterness, but of fulfillment. He had lived according to his principles, served his duty to the end, and demonstrated that death held no terror for those who lived virtuously. His final act was not defensive, but offensive, launching one last charge to recover his body and ensure his proper burial. The immediate tactical result was Persian victory, but the strategic and moral consequences were profound. News of the 300 sacrifice spread throughout Greece like wildfire. The story of men who chose death over dishonor inspired thousands to join the Greek cause. At Salamis and Plataea, Greek warriors fought with renewed courage, knowing that valor had already been proven possible at Thermopylae. In the years that followed, poets, historians, and orators returned again and again to the narrow pass at Thermopylae. They did not write of defeat, but of triumph, of a small band of men who stood against the overwhelming tide of empire and left behind a vision of courage that no empire could erase. The Spartans had shown that death, when embraced with virtue, could become a weapon more powerful than any spear. Their memory was not of warriors lost, but of ideals won, and those ideals traveled farther than Xerxes' armies ever could. The Persians, for all their numbers and resources, could not comprehend the strange power they had encountered. To Xerxes, men were tools, expendable parts of a vast machine of conquest. To Leonidas, men were not counted, but measured in discipline, resolve, and fidelity to principle. This difference in outlook was not merely cultural, but philosophical. The Stoic way of life valued the inner citadel of the soul above the fleeting fortunes of the battlefield. Xerxes had conquered cities, but Leonidas had conquered fear, and that was a victory no empire could undo. Thermopylae also reshaped the way Greeks thought about freedom itself. Until that moment, the polis were divided, more prone to quarrel with one another than to unite against a common threat. Yet the story of 300 Spartans holding the pass planted a seed in the Greek imagination, that liberty demanded sacrifice, that freedom was worth more than life, and that the preservation of their way of life was not negotiable. In this way, Leonidas' stand was not only for Sparta, but for all of Hellas, forging a sense of shared identity through blood and fire. Even centuries later, Roman generals and philosophers studied the example of Thermopylae. Marcus Aurelius himself, writing in his Meditations, echoed the spirit of Leonidas when he reminded himself that death is a natural part of life, and that honor lies in how one meets it. To the Romans, the Spartans represented the ideal of virtus, a strength of character unshaken by fear or fortune. Thus, the narrow pass became not just a Greek memory, but a universal lesson, carried across cultures as a symbol of how virtue transforms mortality into immortality. The Persian invasion ultimately failed, but Leonidas' sacrifice ensured that the Greek victory would not merely be political or military, but moral. When Athens celebrated its freedom, when Plataea rang with the cheers of Greek triumph, when the world recognized the small nation that had defied an empire, all of it was rooted in the moral groundwork laid at Thermopylae. Leonidas had demonstrated that courage is contagious, that virtue is more enduring than numbers, and that even in death, one man can change the fate of nations. Today, the stones of Thermopylae still bear silent witness to the passage of centuries, but the story carved into memory remains as sharp as ever. The monument that stands there does not boast of victory, but simply carries an inscription. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. These words, more powerful than any monument of marble or bronze, remind us that the greatest legacy is not conquest or wealth, but fidelity to principle. Leonidas and his 300 remain eternal because they lived not for themselves, but for a truth greater than themselves, and in that, they embody the highest calling of the Stoic path. The legacy of Leonidas transcends military history. His story became a template for Stoic living, demonstrating how philosophical principles translate into heroic action. He showed that true strength lies not in conquering others, but in mastering oneself, not in avoiding death, but in choosing how to die, not in seeking pleasure, but in fulfilling duty. Modern readers of Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca find in Leonidas a perfect embodiment of their teachings. He lived as if each day might be his last, not with morbid obsession, but with heightened awareness of what truly mattered. He focused on his character rather than his circumstances, his choices rather than his fate, his virtue rather than his victories. The 300 at Thermopylae remind us that philosophy is not merely intellectual exercise, but preparation for life's ultimate tests. When the moment comes to choose between comfort and principle, between survival and honor, between the easy path and the right path, we discover who we truly are. Leonidas chose virtue over life itself, and in doing so, achieved a form of immortality that no conqueror could claim. If you enjoyed this story of courage, philosophy, and sacrifice, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more epic tales from history. Don't forget to like the video if it inspired you, and share it with others so that the legacy of Leonidas and the 300 continues to echo through time.